اسم معروف جدا للدبلوماسية المصرية والسياسة المصرية منذ سنوات عديدة. اسم معروف جدا على المستوى العربي لأنه كان دائما مبعوث الاتحاد الأوربي لعملية السلام في الشرق الأوسط. هو وزير خارجية إسبانيا السابق، وكانت له بصمات كثيرة، وكان يعرف من قبل العرب أنه يقف بجوارهم في الكثير من القضايا. هو الآن في القاهرة لبحث عدد من الموضوعات، موضوعات تتعلق بالشرق الأوسط، موضوعات تتعلق بسوريا، موضوعات تتعلق بالأمن والسلام في المنطقة. السيد ميغيل موراتينوس. You're most welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Could you brief me about the purpose of your visit this time?
Well, I was invited to address a lecture in the British University of Egypt, and I have also the opportunity to meet my old friends in Egypt. And well, trying to share with them my thoughts and my new vision of how the Middle East today is addressing the new challenge, and how some ideas and some proposals could be useful for, helping them to work out a new Middle East that finally will have peace and stability and prosperity that they really deserve.
The Middle East has definitely changed in the past few years than it was 5 years ago, for example. Most of the problems now are erupting within the countries themselves rather than being on a regional level. How do you see it?
But that's a good news, because as much as you have legitimacy, you have, the parties, the countries reinforced by the support of the people, is better. But they have, of course, to finalize the internal affairs, internal, new stability, new democracy, and then finally they will play a much more strong role in the way to relate with the neighbors and the region. And I'm optimistic, because you can see a stronger Middle East countries that are ready for this new chapter in their story, and I'm confident that will be, ready for taking into their future these new challenges.
There is a problem with the word "and then" that you just mentioned, that they put things together within the countries and then they move towards the more regional issues. The "and then" bit takes a bit of time, and at the same time the other party, which is for example Israel, will not be willing to cooperate as much as it is today, as much as it was 5 years ago. As time goes by, there is a de facto that's happening in the region.
You're right. I mean, when I mentioned that then is not a medium, long-term process. It should be urgent. Time is of essence. We cannot wait more time to bring peace and stability and prosperity to the region. We have wasted too much time. It's already a long conflict between Arabs and Israelis, and I think time has come for a final settlement.
If you were here 4 years ago and our viewers were watching us doing this interview talking about the Arab-Israeli conflict, they would have been following this with eagerness. Today, the regular layman is much involved in the domestic issues. They know that, for example, we in Egypt, we have major problems. They want to address their local problems. They want to address the European-Egyptian relations, for example, how Europe is handling it. So, do you feel that there is less enthusiasm on the local parts in Egypt, for example?
Well, it's normal, and I think it's wealthy that they are now taking more interest in their own business. I mean, it's the first priority. But in order to really have the potential for the economic development, for the social progress, for a better living, they have also to secure the environment, and the environment, secure the regional environment. That means to make peace with Israel and to stabilize, because if you have peace with Israel and you have the investment and the security, well, the financial support will come, they will be multiplied. So you cannot divide, you cannot forget about what is internal priority that should be addressed, and that is number one. But immediately after, or in parallel, you should, engage in making a final settlement among the, your neighbors, and in the case with.
But the map is a little bit different with terrorism, especially in Sinai. I mean, we've been in the terrorism phase back in the 1990s. You were part also of the peace process when it was happening there. But now, I mean, with the latest, for example, discoveries that the terrorists, they were caught with certain explosives that were directly imported from Israel into Egypt. And this causes more a kind of phobia on the part of Egyptians in dealing with both the Palestinians, at least the ones in Gaza, and Israel at the same time.
But that's, I agree with you, but let's put it in the positive, not in the negative. We have to establish a new common agenda with a common concern. In Israel, you ask about terrorism, it was a taboo. It was no way to negotiate political issues because for them security first, security after, security right, security left, security. Now you are concerned also on the other side, on the Egyptian side, some problems of insecurity, of terrorism. So let's move together with Israel to identify some common agenda.
But when you see, for example, or you hear or you get reports about Israeli involvement in Ethiopia, for example, and you know that this is against Egyptian interests, how viable is this piece of information in your opinion? And also, this is more of a distrust that's being built because it tells you that they are working against your interests left, right and center.
Well, they can be information. I have no any clear information about what you tell me about Israel working in favor of Ethiopia against Egypt. I mean, but the relationship between Egypt and Israel have to be reinforced, and you have to be reconciled in the way you create a common interest. And I'm sure Israel will be definitely, in favor of reinforcing this relationship with most important Arab neighbor, that is Egypt.
Where is the United States from all this right now?
United States, as I say, is changing its equation of being in the Middle East. I think the old time of, the Gulf, of the oil and security is fading away. No, of course, it's still there. But the United States made some, from my modest point of view, some wrong assessment about the evolution in the Arab countries. They thought that the only way to really go ahead was living or thinking that political Islam was going to prevail all around, and they understood that was not the case.
Did they understand that it is not the case by now, or they
I
not
think
yet?
that you have to bring to society to have the different options, but it's not the only game in town. We have in the Arab world some political trends and some secular movement and some organization, and you have to take care of all of that. You have to really give.
But this has failed in the Arab world. I mean, the political Islam or the Islam political parties, they have failed clearly. However, both the United States and Europe cannot really admit it clearly that this has failed and this is not the model to rule this region.
I think that's, I don't represent European Union myself, I don't represent United States neither. What I think is that we should be much more respectful to the countries and the leadership by their own. They know much better the society than ourselves. We should not impose models or political analysis or political movement without knowing the reality. And I think in this type of political Islam, European Union and United States were in certain extent wrong. Of course we need and we support freedom, rule of law, all this kind of respect.
Values.
But it doesn't mean that we could really impose them in a way that can destroy the whole process. Democracy is not only to have elections. It's only to create the condition for fair and free election, to have civil society organization, to have a counterbalance, to have a constitution, to have a right of constitution that is free and can guarantee the freedom and the liberties, civil rights of everybody. So we went too quick and too speed up. We want election now, election, election, election. And of course election, the parties were better organized, Muslim Brotherhood took over. And then we have the experience. And then unfortunately for them, for everybody, they didn't know how to handle and to reassemble and unify the whole political forces in certain countries. So I think now situation is still up and trying to be much better understood by everybody.
I know that you don't represent Europe, I know that you don't represent the United States, but I know that you've represented the EU for quite some time and you have your own vision on the political issues. Egypt and this part of the Arab world is the backyard of Europe. And so this is it is more important to Europe than it is to the United States. Why do we feel that whatever the United States says and wants still is a decision that is followed by Europe regarding us? If the US says that we have a coup d'etat, then Europe says the same. Why is it happening even though there is a very, very high stakes for Europe here?
Well, I agree with you. I always consider that Europe have to have an independent, autonomous policy. I think it's a wrong policy to follow every time, every moment, every circumstance in the United States. I mean, we are a strong allies of the United States, but we can't differ of the United States because we have a clear, vital interest in the southern part of the Mediterranean. And for that reason, we should be much more aware of the contradiction, the complexity, of this part of the world. So we should be much more aware before we take any decision. We have to really advance and be much more, listening to the realities and not to have a certain strategic concern and then try to impose them without constructing them with the reality. So I agree with you. Europe should have a new look to the region, an independent look, and try to work with their neighbors, their friends, in order that together they can, have a different policy that unfortunately has been the last years that has not really produced good results.
Having said Europe, I mean, I love this proverb that says, if you can fix it, break it. Which actually means, if you cannot fix it, don't break it as well. Taking a look at Europe's involvement with Libya. And now, Europe has helped in breaking Libya the way it was. Maybe it needed to be changed, but it was broken, and now nobody can fix it. Aren't you worried about the future of Europe in the light of what is happening in Libya right now?
Of course I'm concerned, because one of the main added value of European foreign policy was the post-conflict involvement. We should know, before we were never been in the negotiation table, it was always the United States, and then Europe came to get involved in economic development, in security plans. But in the case of Libya,
let's bomb it. The idea was let's bomb it.
There was a fourth opportunity. President Sarkozy and Prime Minister Cameron went there. They say hello, we defeat Gaddafi, and then they left. And there was no follow-up. There was no secure plan. There was not an action plan. There was no roadmap. And that happened what it happened. There was a lack of involvement of international community, of Europeans, and now we find ourselves with a very, very difficult, complex situation that should be solved. And I hope that we should be much more involved, but it will be more costly, more difficult, that we have been, able to get involved from the beginning.
Europe has a problem eastwards in the Ukraine, and Europe has a problem southwards in this part of the Arab world. And does this mean that Europe is getting into a difficult situation right now?
Well, Europe is getting in a difficult situation because Europe himself has to really find his new role in the world. We have the instrument, we have the person, but we don't have common foreign policy. And as we didn't find this European interest, this European foreign policy is going to be very difficult. There are different points of view, the way we have to address the Ukraine and Russia relationship. There is a different view when we address the Middle East and the Mediterranean. We should have a much political integrated foreign policy. And we didn't get to that. Unfortunately, we will suffer again and again with this contradiction and the lack of presence. Europe should be a main actor in the new world of the 21st century, but that has to be done. And for that, we need new leadership, new personalities that can represent Europe in a much more integrated way with much more political authority in order to get results. It's going to happen because the European society wants that, in all the process. We need time, but I'm sure in the near future Europe will be at the right moment, at the right place, with the right person.
Excellency, Mr. Miguel Moratinos, I've enjoyed speaking to you. I would have loved this conversation to continue, but I know that you have other commitments to do, so I thank you for taking your time and for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you to you to invite me to participate, to have this exchange of view, and I hope next time we'll have more time to engage and to discuss and to learn each other the way we should work together for the future.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
السيد ميغيل موراتينوس وزير خارجية اسبانيا السابق ومبعوث الاتحاد الأوربي السابق لعملية السلام الذي جاء إلى مصر في حوار مع الأصدقاء، وكانت فرصة لنا في القاهرة 360 أن نلتقي به ونتعرف منه على كيف تنظر أوروبا إلى هذه المنطقة وكيف وقعت أوروبا في الفخ الذي أوقعتها فيه الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. نلقاكم بعد الفاصل.